What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. So, on the eve of the Brooklyn Nets facing off against the Houston Rockets and speculation about James Harden's return to Houston, the Rockets organization announced that they will be retiring James Harden's number 13. And this has come with a lot of uh, some criticism. Okay. Um, Number one, I think a lot of fans are still salty at James Harden for how he exited the Houston Rockets franchise. And I'm I'm not going to sit here and act like I'm the biggest James Harden fan because I'm not. But I do want to be fair in this scenario. So look, a lot of us saw what he did. We saw how he purposely got out of shape. He purposely did things to fall under protocol to not be able to play. Um, he was disruptive with certain teammates, especially apparently with DeMarcus Cousins. Supposedly threw a basketball in the direction of a player. He acted like a complete ass to get traded, and then in interviews, subsequently make it seem like it was the organization. And by the way, I had one of my subs ask me this question. I wasn't able to respond to you. Um, yeah, I do think that the Rockets organization may be setting up Silas to fail, Steven Silas to fail. I really do. But that is the case often when it comes to certain coaches. Now, should he be should he be retired? I mean, should his number be retired? I mean, look, you have a lot of people, you have a lot of players whose numbers have been retired, and they never won a championship. Elgin Baylor, for instance, never won a championship. Neither did Steve Nash. No one ever brings up the fact that Steve Nash didn't win the titles. But certain players, they get brought up all the time. Whether you're talking about Karl Malone or Patrick Ewing or Reggie Miller at times, certain players, they get brought up all of the time and they didn't win a title. You know? Look, let's look at the facts here. James Harden played for the Houston Rockets franchise for 8 seasons. And in those 8 seasons, while they did not win championships, the Houston Rockets did return to prominence in the Western Conference. Now, you can argue that in 2018 they should have won a championship that year, or that they were heavily favored. They had a great defensive team. That team won 65 games, which is number one in Houston Rockets franchise history. They should have won. They imploded in the fourth quarter. Well, actually, they kind of imploded the whole game, and James Harden didn't lead them out of the abyss, so to speak. But when you look at his tenure there, he averaged 29 points a game, which is number one in franchise history. He won 3 scoring titles, including, I think, one year averaging over an absurd 36 points a game, the most since Michael Jordan, 86, 87. He won an assist title. Um, and, I mean, he put on a lot of devastating one-man shows in Houston. Now, did that translate to championships? No, it didn't. And I think James Harden is mistaken or he's not being quite honest when he says that he didn't have any help. He did have help there. He's played with some talent. Um, so that does take away from his legacy. But I still think that he's the third greatest Houston Rocket player in their history. Okay. Now look at the players whose numbers have been retired. Okay. Kim Olajuwon, who is the greatest Houston Rocket ever, okay, 2 championships. I would put Moses Malone ahead of James Harden. I'll tell you why. He played 6 years there, and in those 6 years, for the most part, he did not have a great team around him. I would argue the teams around him were inferior, consistently inferior to the talent James Harden had. All right, but he was able to take the 1981 Rockets, who only won 40 games, throughout the playoffs, all right, and carry them on his back and to go against Larry Bird's Boston Celtics. I think they won 2 games in that series in the finals. But he was able to take that team to the finals at the very least. Okay? And he won 2 league MVPs. And during his 6 year span there, he averaged 24 points and 15 rebounds per game. 15 rebounds. Unbelievable. All right? I would put James Harden third. Now, other players have had their numbers retired. Rudy Tomjanovich, who's a really, really good player, but he's better known as a coach, by most modern day fans of the 1990s Houston Rockets. Okay, they won 2 championships. And Calvin Murphy. Calvin Murphy is the best point guard in that franchise history. Now, some people might say James Harden. I consider him more of a combo guard or a hybrid. Okay, so pure point guard, Calvin Murphy. But Calvin Murphy never won a championship. Okay, and neither did Moses Malone as a Rocket, but he did win one with Philly. And Calvin Murphy has had allegations against him. And also Yao Ming. Yao Ming's number has been retired. But let me ask you this. Whose run with the Rockets was more impressive? James Harden or Yao Ming? Now, Yao Ming, during his time with the Rockets, averaged, I believe it was something like 19 points and 9 rebounds. James Harden, I think, has put up something like, I think his numbers were like 29 points. I want to say maybe 6.5 rebounds, 7.5, close to 8 assists per game, and maybe almost 2 steals. I mean, phenomenal overall numbers. The guy has put up in his career 24 50-point games, just behind Kobe's 26, including the one in the playoffs. Now, and ultimately, he's probably going to pass Kobe um, when everything's said and done. It might threaten Jordan, depending on the situation. So, and you can argue that Yao Ming's time with the Rockets was not as successful as James Harden's time with the Rockets. And he had a Hall of Famer as a teammate with Tracy McGrady. I don't think that James Harden, I got to think about this before I say it. I don't think that James Harden has had quite an offensive talent playing alongside him in his prime like Tracy McGrady. Now, he did have Carmelo Anthony, but by that time, Carmelo Anthony was more on the downside of his career. Yao Ming played with a prime Tracy McGrady, okay? Who I still kind of think of. I know Blood Print don't like this, but I'm just not as enamored with Tracy as some people. I'm just being honest, okay? But I don't have a problem with them retiring this number. You know, I've seen some people say, "Well, how can you retire someone's number who never won a title?" And there have been multiple players whose numbers have been retired by an organization. They've never won a championship. Never. Brad Davis's number is retired by the Dallas Mavericks. Okay, and I think 90% of modern fans might not even know who the hell Brad Davis was. Um, so a lot of these guys, a lot of people who are casuals don't really know what they're really talking about. Allen Iverson, of course, never won a championship. but you don't really hold it again. You got to look at the circumstances involving a player. And that's why I think the ring has become so overrated when it comes to rating players now. Now, one thing that is unusual is to announce that you're going to retire a person's number while they're still playing. But it has happened recently. Remember, the Golden State Warriors organization announced that they were going to retire Kevin Durant's number. Um, and this was right after he went to Brooklyn. Now, this is the last point I want to make. A little bit of this, I think, is um, public relations, um, trying to smooth things over. You know, James Harden did not have the best exit from that franchise. And this might be a way of the Rockets trying to mend relations, okay? Um, and maybe also keep James Harden from dropping 50 or 60 on them. But and shout out to LB because he reminded me of this. If you're not subscribed to LB, please subscribe to LB's channel. He reminded me of this. To this day, Kevin Garnett and the Minnesota Timberwolves owner are not on speaking terms. And Kevin Garnett, who is the greatest player in Timberwolves history, no disrespect to Karl Anthony Towns or to Kevin Love, but he's the greatest player in their franchise history. And they've never retired his number. So you don't want to have a situation like that. So all in all, I don't have a problem with this. Tell me what you guys think.